When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks.
Hello, this is international football commentator Derek Ray, and you're listening to the Ranks FC podcast.
Hello, Rank Squad, and welcome to Ranks FC. It's your favourite transatlantic football podcast, and as we head into an international break, we thought we'd mix the script up a little bit. My name's Jack Collins, and I'll be your host today. And joining me across the water, all the way from San Diego, it's Mr. Dean Jones. How you doing, mate?
Hello, mate. Yeah, I'm good. We're out of transfer season now. Most people are out of transfer season now. Not me, mate. Never stop thinking about what might happen. Can't do it. I can't do it. It's impossible.
Yeah, you're putting your the guru hat back on today to talk about some potential deals that might happen in 2026. And I got sent this through. I woke up this morning to this message about Dean being like, yeah, this is what I want to do for the episode. I was like, okay, cool. We've had some discussions about little bits and bobs. It's probably time for another sacking or saving Europe's under fire managers in the near future as well. But I was like, wicked. Let's get stuck into this one. So I'm basically going to hand you the floor, mate. It's a big Dean Jones carry episode.
Yeah, look, it's an international break. We don't want to talk about the international games because it's too difficult, and a lot of people don't care. Oh, yeah. Well, you like international football, and so many people switch off during this period. What we like is to imagine the future, some of those big moves that are going to happen. It just feels like a timeless one. You could even jump into this one in December, and hopefully it still stands up. And we'll do the save or sack episode when we come back. I think we can get prepared for the domestic action getting back underway next week. So yeah, here we go. I'm gonna get stuck into some transfer deals that have potential to take off in 2026. Obviously, this is my day job. For those of you that don't know, I am a transfer reporter. And these days I am, by the way, dropping my stuff on Team Talk. So if I've had a few messages recently, it's like, where can I actually read your stuff? These are teamtalk.com is where you can read my stories. And also at Flash Score, I do a transfer analysis article or something similar most days for them on their app. So Team Talk and Flash Score are the two places that you can read all of my bits and pieces, and usually I post some of them on X as well. I don't post all of them, but yeah, I do post when I remember. Can't say I'm quite as good as the likes of Fabrizio on X, but I am as good at Fabrizio as knowing what's coming in the future. I promise. Look, I'm going to start big today. I'm going to start big because I don't want to build up to one today. I thought I'm going to get started right at the top. Like, what major deal can we expect to happen next year. And I was like, well, the one that I've written about recently and the one that I think would be the biggest is Harry Kane. Harry Kane making a transfer at the end of this season will be massive, whether he comes back to the Premier League or not. Now, Kane recently made goal-scoring history. He scored twice when Bayern Munich beat Werder Bremen 4-1. It took him to 100 goals for the German champions and made him the fastest player in history to reach a century for a club in Europe's top 5 leagues. Took him 104 matches, Jack, to get to 100 goals for Bayern Munich. It's outlandish. He scored more since that even happened. And I'll be honest, I think Bayern is a really good fit for him. I think the club and the team are actually a great fit for Kane. When you think about what you get from German football, German society, but also Bayern Munich as a club, should be anyway, reliable, efficient, successful. And Kane on a personal level is all of those things. And I think he's found himself a place here whereby he is just fitted into a system and a model that's perfect for him. And even at the weekend, he scored a goal and he dropped deep, which people criticise him for, but he drops deep. So he's almost behind play at one point, and then the ball's just laid off to the side to him. And he just kind of smashes one in from, 25 yards or so. And that just looked so simple. But he's just part of a system here that he's totally got to a T. The problem is for Bayern Munich that Harry Kane could leave them at the end of this season because his contract contains a break clause that would allow him to move on for around £54 million. And we do believe that Tottenham actually have a priority to sign him if he was to choose to return to Tottenham. Now, there will be other options too. Barcelona are being touted as one of them because at the moment, you would imagine they move on from Lewandowski. And if that happens, they need a new number 9. Haaland's been talked up. I don't think Haaland will happen yet. I think it would make more sense that to replace Lewandowski, you get Kane in for a couple of years and then go Haaland. So I think that that's plausible. And what about Tottenham? What do we think about Tottenham? Well, he's always been quite open-minded about this. Obviously, he's on 213 Premier League goals. He's chasing the record set by Alan Shearer, and I don't think it's just that would bring him back. Though he wouldn't come back for the nostalgia of it. I don't think that's going to happen. Certainly not at this stage. Maybe if it was the last year of his career, maybe he would do that. But I don't think right now that would happen. But if Tottenham are in the Champions League, I think that we are in a situation whereby Kane could seriously consider a return to Tottenham and to the Premier League. So this is a story that's definitely going to come back up again, and it's going to potentially be one of the big stories of next summer. Obviously, there's a World Cup next summer, so when we're talking about all of these transfer stories, we have to consider that there is this logistical barrier that is going to exist because everyone's going to be in America playing in a strange old World Cup with a lot of teams. And Kane's going to be one of them. So it might be that these transfers don't happen until later in the summer. But what's your take, Jack? What do you reckon? Kane, stay at Bayern, go to Spurs, go to Barca, go somewhere else?
I was reading an article by the ever-brilliant Andy Brassel a couple of weeks ago about Harry Kane and this kind of idea that it was a marriage of convenience when he went to Bayern. Like Bayern needed a number 9 to fill that gap left by Lewandowski, and Harry Kane needed to win silverware to be started to put in the bracket which he deserves to be in. Obviously, we talked about Harry Kane at length on The Truth last week. And I think that, when he went there was probably a sense he was like, yeah, I'll do this for a year or two, get some trophies in the cabinet, play at the top level, and then I'll return to the Premier League and beat that record. And I don't know if that's true anymore. I think that there is a level of this that he has been really quite blown away by how much he has enjoyed his experience at Bayern, how much the club has suited him, how much he's enjoyed playing, for them in both the Bundesliga and in the Champions League. And I think that there is there's definitely a world where Harry Kane leaves next summer, right? Like I'm not doubting that whatsoever. But I think the offer would have to be pretty remarkable. I don't think that breaking the Premier League scoring record is at the top of his priority list anymore. I feel like there's far bigger things that he can look at and be like, well, look what I achieved here. I've just, become the fastest player ever to 100 goals. I wonder if he's looking at it and saying, well, maybe that's my 100 goals for Bayern, but could it be my first 100? First centenary that I strike up at this club? Because ultimately, this team is wired around him now, and it's only taken him 2 real full seasons for that to be the case, for him to be the main man around which it all operates. And you saw Nicholas Jackson go in there this summer. What happens when Jackson starts? Well, it's not to rotate Kane, it's to drop him deeper and allow him to fulfill that creative passion a little bit more as well. I do wonder if Barcelona came calling, if that would be something that could very much turn his head, because I'd imagine that there is a sense of being like, oh, okay, have won things in Germany. Could I now win things in Spain and still potentially return to the Premier League after that, to kind of end it? But yeah, I'm far less convinced that Harry Kane is going to leave Bayern than I was 6 months into his tenure there. I wonder if he just has kind of fitted in so nicely, if he's found that fit so comfortable that actually there is a world where we see him play for another 2-3 years as the main man at Bayern, especially in the striker market that we currently have, right? Like, you look at what it's costing to bring big strikers in, and to replace Harry Kane, how much would Bayern have to spend on a player to be that guy for them? That's a lot of money. And I do wonder if there is a sense of he has to kind of inform the club, I believe. If he wants to have this clause activated, he has to inform them by February or something like that, to that extent. I do wonder if that conversation comes up, whether they'll be like, no, we want you to be the guy. We want you to remain. We see you as the centerpiece for quite some time. And I don't think it'll be lost on Harry Kane that Bayern were so adamant that they wanted to sign him at the time they did, and that actually he was the kind of only person they were looking for to fill that void. That's something that will make him feel incredibly special. And as you know, he's a relatively private person. He's not someone that comes out and kind of looks for or hogs the spotlight. I think he might have found a place there, as opposed to somewhere like Barcelona, or if he returned to Tottenham, where the spotlight would be on him week in, week out. Yes, of course it is in the German press, etc. But I wonder if there is just a different level of kind of fame and that kind of slightly slower pace of paparazzi, etc., that kind of feeds into a very pleasant lifestyle while he's in Munich.
Mate, I'm desperate for him to go to Barcelona. I think it would be great. He turns 33 next summer, Harry Kane. And look, why would he stay at Bayern? To win the Champions League, I'd say. But they could win the Champions League this season. They've got as good a chance of winning it this season as they're ever going to have, really.
Sure.
So if they don't do it this season, then just assume you're never going to do it there. All right? So go and play for Barcelona. Like, moving back into their stadium, it's rebuilt, it's rebranded, it's going to be amazing. You are at a stage where you're never getting the chance to do this again. You can go to Tottenham after this. You can go somewhere else after this. You're not getting the chance to go to Barcelona ever again. So if Barcelona genuinely want Harry Kane as a short-term successor to Lewandowski while they figure out how they get Erling Haaland, I hope he does it. I think it would be amazing. And I think it would lift him to another level again too. He's disrespected. People don't appreciate him enough. He should have been in the Ballon d'Or conversation by now, given his goals record and his consistent levels of performance and professionalism. Obviously, part of the reason he hasn't been is because the teams that he's been in haven't been performing at a certain level. And look, maybe if Bayern did win the Champions League this year, then maybe he did come into that. Maybe I would say that if England won the World Cup, England aren't going to win the World Cup. But if those things did happen, then he would be in the Ballon d'Or conversation. But
I was going to say, I feel like he can be in that conversation at Bayern as much as he can be at Barcelona.
Yeah, but it's more than that. It's Barcelona's just a bigger, better club than Bayern Munich. It's way more fun. It's got so much more status attached to it. And to look back on your career, know that you took that chance to leave Tottenham because you wanted to go and win trophies, like club trophies, go and win the Bundesliga, fine. Wins whatever else he wins this season, but then goes to Barcelona there's just levels to football, Jack. And to say that was your trajectory, Tottenham, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, and then maybe one to finish it off, all off at the end when he's 35, 36. I think that's what he should do. And I kind of hope it's what he will do. I do think the Tottenham thing's got legs, though. And I don't really want it to happen. It's not a narrative. I'd still bet on him being at Bayern at the start of next year. I was a betting man. Well, I'm glad you're not a betting man, because the predictions that you made earlier on in the season were terrible. You said Amorim was going to lose his job, and you said that Isaac was going to stay at Newcastle.
I said he should.
No, you said he was going to. You said you believed that Amorim would be leaving Man United, and you said that Isaac would end the transfer window as a Newcastle player.
Yeah, I did say that. That one I definitely got ring. I think the Amorim one is slightly more up in the air, to be honest.
I think Bayern's a great fit for Harry Kane. I think that it's a great fit for Harry Kane, but I'm not satisfied with it. I think there can be another level to his career, and I want this. I'm excited about when this transfer rumour, the speculation gathers more pace in the second half of the season, to really gauge where his mind's at. Because at the moment, we're not getting all I'm being told is like he's open-minded as to what happens next. That's all they're really saying. And his camp generally they're just kind of ignoring it, as they should do, to be honest. But they won't do that at the start of next year. We'll start to get some inkling as to what Kane fancies doing next.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. Who's in next, team?
Next up, mate, at number 2, I'm going with Enzo Fernandez. And this, again, is a pretty interesting one in terms of narrative. And it's not a story, I think, that is a big surprise in terms of where he's going to be ending up. So Real Madrid, we know, are in the market for a midfielder. I think Enzo Fernandez is the one that they go for. It's a story that's been in the background for a while. It's been in the background. It's always felt like it's likely that Enzo Fernandez does end up playing for Real Madrid. And now, I think for the first time, even people at Chelsea are kind of just waiting for them to make the offer. I'm told that the long-standing interest not only persists, but they're starting to really consider making this more of an active pursuit. The big question is, what is he going to cost? I mean, Chelsea signed him for £106 million. And he ain't got any worse. So he's going to cost more than that, especially as he's not a player they particularly want to lose. And obviously he's signed up to a long contract like everyone at Chelsea is. So he's I think 2032 is his contract expiry. So these massive deals that Chelsea give to players, they do pay off in this sense, because they either land a massive fee for him or they manage to keep a star asset. I think there are some players at Chelsea who have become stars that are irreplaceable. I'm not sure they would see Enzo Fernandez as irreplaceable, which again adds a layer of uncertainty to his future. Where he fits in exactly at Real Madrid, I don't know, because when you consider the exact role that he's playing right now for Chelsea and how advanced it becomes and stuff like that, it's not too dissimilar to the positions I expect Jude Bellingham to end up in for Real Madrid. So I'm like, well, how does that even work? Like, it's not like they're linked to Rodri, who's a completely different midfield player to Enzo Fernandez at the moment. So it can't be a one or the other situation. But from what I hear, and Alexis McAllister as well, of course, is also linked with Real Madrid. And there is some genuine interest around that too. But I'm hearing more about Enzo Fernandez. And if there's a narrative to be built up right now, I think Fernandez to Madrid is one that gathers pace.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of addressed it, but I have concerns with this. Now, we were saying this briefly on our Patreon show. We were talking about this potential deal and kind of teeing it up a little bit for this episode. And my genuine thought at that point was, okay, and look, I could be wrong on this, and I'm sure that there'll be different Chelsea fans, different pockets of Chelsea fans who have different opinions. That if they were going to move one of their superstar players on, Enzo Fernandez, I think, would probably be the one that they would be the least upset to lose, as opposed to a Moises Caicedo, who is blossoming into, or has already blossomed into, the one of pretty much the best defensive midfielders in the world, one of the best players in the world at this point. You don't want to lose a Cole Palmer or someone of that kind of effect. But I think that if the right money and the right offer came in for Enzo, he feels like the one that they could most naturally replace. Now, there were points last season, and I know that there's always a caveat that if Romeo Lavia could stay injury-free, then he'd be in this midfield. He can't. So there's kind of little point discussing that in its entirety. But there were points, and I think it's been interesting that other players have come in and Enzo is the one who gets shifted around. He's the one that ends up further forward. When he's in the double pivot with Moises Caicedo, there are defensive frailties in there. And I kind of look at what Real Madrid want, and I totally understand the concept here because we're talking about players who can dictate a game. They've lost to Modric, they've lost to Kroos. What do Real Madrid need at the base of midfield? Someone who's able to kind of set the tempo, someone who's going to be able to make games tick. I don't think that Enzo has been that player for Chelsea. That doesn't mean that he couldn't be in a different situation. And I think it is important to kind of make that point. But I kind of struggle with exactly where he plays. What is his exact role in his midfield? Because you probably need to bring someone in or next to him or you need to play a midfield 3. So if they're going to play with a number 10, then it doesn't really make sense. And I think that's been one of the issues with making it all stick at Chelsea. None of this is to say that Enzo is anything but a wonderful footballer, by the way. He's a lovely, lovely player. I just feel like he's sometimes shoehorned into different roles. And he's one of those players that, only seems to kind of click when it's all clicking around him. I can see why there would be interest, but I'm not 100% sure he fulfills exactly what Real Madrid are looking for if they're trying to bring in a midfielder to be the controller, to be the person who sets them up. Equally, we've seen players go in there and kind of change. Think about when Luka Modric went in, right? He was seen as the number 10 and, ended up playing deeper and being that incredible kind of majestic figure in the midfield who was able to do so much. So it doesn't mean it can't happen. It can't be a change. I'm just not 100% sure he's the kind of plug and play option I would be looking at for that kind of money. If you have that kind of money to spend on a midfielder, I wonder if it could be spent better elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the dilemma that I kind of have in my own head about exactly what Real are looking for here. I'm sure that maybe during an international break is a time when we might even start to hear more about that, whether it's this international break or the one coming up in November. But yeah, Enzo seems to be very much on the radar. And as I say, Chelsea themselves are almost at the stage now where they're anticipating some form of contact, even if it's just to find out from Chelsea what their stance is going to be on him for next year. So let's wait and see where we sit with that. I'm going to stick with Chelsea for number 3 and talk about Maignan because it's not gone away. It's not gone away. Now, obviously, Chelsea did make an approach to sign Maignan from AC Milan. That was in June before the Club World Cup. Maignan at the time seemed almost certain to leave, but the situation changed slowly and it ended in Milan kind of persuading him that he should stay and that he would be a big part of what they would do this season, and as they try to kind of galvanise the club and turn things around. And to some extent that has actually happened, and Maignan's done well. But he still hasn't agreed a new contract, and they're still no closer to agreeing a new contract. And so at this moment in time, he's on course to become a free agent. So what happens here? Well, Chelsea, I'm told, do continue to rate Maignan. Robert Sanchez just doesn't seem to be the answer to me. Like, I don't want to get too personal on this and be like what I think, but we talked in the summer about what Chelsea need. The fact they even tried to sign Maignan tells you there was some feeling within the club that they needed a new goalkeeper. This season, you watch Sanchez and Jorgensen, and there are games, there are moments when you just cannot trust them and you can't rely on them. And so, talking of kind of short term, like we talked about Harry Kane going to Barcelona for 2 years, do Chelsea go and get Maignan just for a couple of years while they're waiting for Mike Penders to be the real deal? Because Penders is out on loan at the moment, but does seem to be someone they are hoping they can legitimately trust to go on and put forward a case to be Chelsea's number one and become one of the best young goalkeepers in the world. And another point to this is I asked someone, why didn't Chelsea come into the conversation for Donnarumma? Why did that not happen? Because it felt in a moment when they couldn't get Maignan and Donnarumma became available and Man United had brief contacts and there was a couple of other clubs sniff. Chelsea very quickly were like, we're not involved in this. We're not. And I was like, why aren't you though? Why are you not in this conversation? And I'm led to believe that part of it is because if they do sign another goalkeeper, then they think it'll be Maignan and they think that this is going to open up again in 2026 and they would rather wait for that than have done Donnarumma kind of on the spur of the moment then when it hadn't been part of their thinking and they would just kind of make a knee-jerk signing.
I know this sounds a bit ridiculous, but Donnarumma would have broken Chelsea's wage structure, which is a bit of a strange one because obviously there's a lot of people on long contracts, but actually one of the kind of real positives of this Chelsea collective in terms of the boardroom has been bringing down wages. We talked about the fact that Liam Delap earlier in the summer nearly moved about somewhere else because Chelsea weren't willing to budge from their original. And look, this isn't suggesting these are bad wages. I'm pretty sure Liam Delap is on 100k a week, but there were bigger offers for him, and they're having to sell things in a different way. And I do wonder what that looks like from their perspective, from a Donnarumma angle as opposed to a Maignan one. I'd imagine that Gini Donnarumma is basically able to go out and demand whatever he wants, right? Like that's where we've got to.
Well, so will Maignan if he's a free agent.
Potentially, but obviously if there's been contact beforehand, then there's probably more of an idea of what that looks like. And I'll be surprised that even if he comes in as a free agent, if Mike Maignan is on more than what Donnarumma is at Manchester City. And so maybe that's coming into thinking. But also, Donnarumma probably has a longer tail. You bring him in, you're kind of admitting that the rest of the recruitment, your Mike Pender's kind of gamble is one that you're not fundamentally trusting. Whereas if you bring Maignan in for a couple of years, maybe that's slightly different in terms of the angle of attack and how you frame it to those players coming through. And to Penders, who's been brought in on the assurance that, one day they see him as a Chelsea number one. So I think that this makes sense from that perspective. And whilst I've been impressed on the most part by Robert Sanchez this season, I think he's had a decent start to the season. Maybe take the Manchester United game aside, obviously. But actually the drop-off from him to Jorgensen has been pretty drastic. And it really has been something that has cost Chelsea at times. So them looking to upgrade without necessarily breaking the bank on a new goalkeeper makes sense from that perspective, especially with some waiting in the wings.
Yeah, I really do think that Chelsea signed a goalkeeper. And whereas we've talked about Kane and Enzo as summer transfers, I've got a feeling Chelsea go and do this in January, especially if they look well positioned in the Premier League to put forward a title case. I think at that point, Enzo Maresca might even push for it because it does look like a potential flaw that would cost them a shot at winning the league if they can genuinely stay in that conversation. And I know that a lot of Chelsea fans don't want to consider themselves even in that bracket at the moment, but having just beaten Liverpool, being within touching distance of them, having to play Arsenal in the not too distant future and being able to pull them back. Yeah, I've got a feeling that this might happen in January.
Okay, all right. One to keep an eye on at the start of
Milan definitely won't want that to happen, by the way. So that's the other thing to consider. Milan do not want that deal happening. So the other, what I should point out here is that there is a line of thinking that they sign another goalkeeper in January and go for Maignan at the end of the season, which sounds bonkers, but this is Chelsea, so I'm not ruling it out.
Yeah, that does sound bonkers. Also, the other thing is that Milan are, it depends where they are at that point. Yeah. Because, if he's not signing a new contract, then obviously you're going to want to gain some money off a player. If you get an offer in January, then that's a different conversation. But if they're within their own title charge, which, again, I think is probably a little bit unlikely, but I don't want to rule it out at this point, especially considering the run of form that they've been on. And obviously that's going to affect how they're looking at this as well. All right, we're going to take a break there. When we come back, we're going to get into some more deals to look out for in 2026. Don't go anywhere. When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks. Welcome back to Ranks FC. We're talking deals that you need to be keeping an eye on potentially for 2026. Jack Collins and transfer guru Dean Jones alongside you. And Dean, back to you. Who's up next?
Yeah, we've had a big three there. And at number 4, I've got a player that I think is likely to, at very least, weigh up his options at the end of the season and consider whether he is ready to go and do this. At Juventus, it's Gleison Bremer, the Brazilian defender who I absolutely love. Now, at the moment, they're kind of managing his condition. Obviously, he had a pretty bad injury, which he's been coming back from. So for the last couple of games, he's been sidelined. But there had been a good feeling about him before last week, about like where he got himself to, that they knew that they would have to manage his game time across this season to make sure that they got the best out of him. He's 28 years old, and he's still got a presence and a command over opponents that is hard to match, to be quite frank. And there is an interest in signing him from Premier League clubs. Now, the reason that this one really does become a narrative is because he has a release clause of around 60 million euros, which I think for Bremer seems absolutely nothing. Now, there's this injury situation to consider for sure. But if he managed to prove his fitness across the course of this season, we've already had Chelsea, Man United and Liverpool linked with him over the course of the last year or two. And those sorts of clubs are still going to come into focus for the type of landing spot we could expect. So, look, I think he's always been a very solid player, but from the early returns that we saw from him at Juve this season, it seemed like he hadn't had much of a fall off in terms of form. It seemed like he would be the wall on which Juve could build upon this season. And I'm hoping that he gets back onto the field soon and shows that he's completely fine. And then, if all of that happens, I do believe that Juve are going to have a battle to hold on to him long term, because I think he's too good that clubs won't consider that to be a good price point to go and get him at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, he's a wonderful, wonderful defender. I do think it's going to be interesting to see what, the injury element of this season looks like, because actually up to last year, where he obviously does, a cruciate ligament, his injury history has been pretty good, right? Like ever since he was at Torino, he was pretty hot, in terms of not missing many games over the course of a season. You look at 2021, according to Transfer Market, he misses 2 games that season. 21-22, he misses 3. 22-23, after the move to Juventus, there is 11 games missed, but it's 6 different injuries. So, there's small things. He's missing 1 or 2 games at a time. I think you could cope with that amount of players. And, some of them are obviously for the national team as well. And then last year, he misses 45 games, pretty much the entirety of the season, with 1 major cruciate ligament. Now, it's interesting, obviously, with the cruciate that you have to ease them back. And I think that actually Juve seem to be doing quite a good job with just managing this situation at the moment. But it really does, I think, this one depend on how much of Bremer we see over the course of this season. And look, I'd like to think that we'll be able to kind of see him back at his best very shortly. They're just managing it a little bit at the moment. We saw that obviously absent for the draw against Milan and for the game against Villarreal as well. But we're seeing the way that he's putting it together. He was subbed in the game against Atalanta. He was given a rest in that game against Verona before the Champions League game. So I can understand why Juve are being careful with this one. But equally, before we make any huge judgments or jumps on it, I think a lot is going to depend on how this season goes. That said, I think that you're absolutely right. In terms of a centre-back, in terms of what he's capable of being, and still 28 years old, there still feels like a good number of years that he's going to be able to be excellent. I've just got a funny feeling that he could be a player that people, I think at the top end of the Premier League, will look at as being an answer to certain issues that have kind of reared their heads. Now, Arsenal probably don't need to go and sign a Gleison Bremer for that kind of price, but we don't know what's going to happen for Liverpool in the future. Obviously, Mark Gay's deal fell through. Does that mean he might join Liverpool in the summer? Sure. Does it mean he also might not? Also, as a free agent, he'll have his pick and different things. We've talked about Chelsea centre-backs before. This feels like the kind of deal that, okay, he's a little bit older than the type of players that Chelsea tend to buy, but if they're trying to add a little bit of experience and solidity to that back line where it's been a bit all over the place with injuries and players just not being able to find consistent bursts of form, this feels like a better element of this. Now, again, a lot is going to depend there in terms of that discussion around how he performs this season. But I'm a huge fan of Bremer's, and I think it'd be very interesting to see what comes up for him, when this situation arises.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to move on to number 5. A man of the moment, really, Antoine Semenyo. He done us over, mate. Our Fulham were torn apart by him on Friday night in the rain. Scored one very good goal. Whether you should be allowed to score from that angle or not, it's open to opinion. But he just takes his goals so well, Antoine Semenyo, and he also composes himself so well. Whether he's running at someone or whether he's running onto a ball, just usually making the right choices. Bournemouth did remarkably well to get him to sign a new contract over the summer. So he's signed up for now, but that doesn't mean the interest in him has gone away. And I think at the end of this season, Bournemouth can expect to fight once again to hold on to him. Tottenham, we know of interest in him. Man United, I'm told, still have an interest, despite the fact that they've signed Cunha and Mbeumo. Told they still do like Semenyo and would consider him going forwards. And Bayern Munich have also come into the picture here. They've been linked, and I'm told that is a legitimate link, and they could potentially try to sign Semenyo at the end of the season. This is the trajectory that he's on that feels kind of fail-proof. I don't know what his value would be, because Bournemouth say that the player does not have a release clause. If that's the case, then I'd imagine it's upwards of 70 million for Semenyo. Like, that would be my guess, which isn't cheap, but considering what he's doing in the Premier League at the moment, week in, week out, doesn't actually seem that bad.
No, it doesn't. And look, I think people have paid that kind of fee for players with far less of, what they've been able to put together. But so I was watching Match of the Day this weekend on the BBC here in the UK, and one of the things they showed after the Fulham Bournemouth game was the stats from Semenyo in the Premier League since August 2024. So not his rank for Bournemouth, but his rank across the entirety of the Premier League. He's tied first for shots. So in the last 15 months or 14 months, he's tied second for carries ending in a shot. He's second for carries ending in a chance created. He's fourth in the entire Premier League for successful dribbles. And then he's top outright for the amount of duels he competed in and possession won in the final third. So you're looking at a player who not only is an absolute kind of creative unicorn in so many ways, but also has the work rate to be able to win the ball back and make things happen in that final third time and time and time again. Now, part of this is obviously systemic. We know how Andoni Iraiola's Bournemouth want to play, and that suits Semenyo down to the ground in terms of what he's able to bring as an all-round player. But I will say that when you have a player that complete, when you have a player kind of leading light in so many of these things, both on and off ball, that's where you start to be looking at it and thinking, wow, okay, this is someone now who just feels so incredibly special. And at this point in his career, 25 years old, still plenty of time in front of him. He'll be 26 by January. It just feels like the time is going to be right where someone is going to make that move. And, with a lot of the discussion last summer, we talked about Bremer, we talked about Wissa, we talked about Matheus Cunha at Wolves. They felt like the players that were going to get those moves, from an early moment. And it feels very similar with Semenyo this time around. Now, part of me really hopes he just stays with Bournemouth and potentially they get European football and he kind of kicks on in that regard and is able to kind of take a team as a talisman to heights that they've never reached before. But equally, I do think that there is going to be a level of interest that's going to be very, very hard to turn down from a Bournemouth perspective, especially when we saw this summer that when the right offers came in for players, Bournemouth trusted their own ability to rebuild. Right. So obviously it wasn't the attacking line this summer, but it was the defensive line completely shredded. Milos Kerkez, Ilya Zabarnyi, Dean Heisen all went when the fee was correct. I do wonder if the fee is right here, if they would take that and be like, look, fair enough, we will rebuild with that kind of money. I think that whilst it was the defensive line that was shredded this summer, it might end up being the attacking line because there's plenty of very, very talented footballers at Bournemouth that ends up getting picked apart next year.
Yeah, Bournemouth fans, it's a fine line, isn't it? You want to see your players doing well, but not too well.
It's okay. Look at what happened. Those players left and Bournemouth are fourth in the Premier League and have had the best start in club history, despite the fact that they lost so many of these players in the back line. Like, you have to trust the club to be able to take the right fees and continue to rebuild. And we have this argument sometimes, like modern football, about whether it's a good thing to be a feeder club in inverted commas. But that's the mark of a well-run institution. Yes, obviously it's risky because you have to continue to get it right. But at the same time, that's how you push yourself into new stratospheres, being able to reinvest that money, being able to potentially go and do a new stadium if you're Bournemouth, potentially, reinvest in the training ground, build the academy up, take those advantages that you can get in terms of infrastructure. Like, this is the skill set at the same time. And if you go and get that, we have a Bournemouth fan on our Patreon who sends us some wonderful messages about the club week in, week out. And who's basically saying, look, if that 70 million comes in, I'll be like, thank you very much. Thank you for your service. We'll reinvest that. And I trust the club to do that. And I think that's an important part of it. Certain clubs you trust to reinvest. Like, we were talking about Rodrigo Muniz in Fulham at the summer. And I was like, I don't trust the club to get that right as a reinvestment. But if you're a Bournemouth fan, having seen what they're putting together, I think you can start to trust the system as well, while still letting someone like Antoine Semenyo, who's worked all the way up to get to this point, right? Like, you think about the fact that he had, trials at Arsenal and Spurs and Millwall and Palace and Fulham and rejected by all of them. He goes through it, and joins a youth academy program at Gloucestershire, and then signs for Bristol City, goes out on loan at Bath and Newport. And, before he gets this big breakthrough at Bristol City and then Bournemouth, he's worked his way through the system in a way that very few Premier League players would have had to. He understands the value of where he's got to. Him making it to the very top would be an incredible story in its own right as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that carries me on, actually, to number 6, and a player that was kind of faced with a similar scenario to one that Semenyo might face soon, in Carlos Baleba, who was pursued for a transfer. Man United touched base with Brighton to see if they could get him out of there in the summer and were told it would not be possible. And that if it were ever to be possible, you'd be looking at upwards of £100 million is what we now believe. And Baleba's future is going to be back on the agenda. Mate, I'm not sure what that interest did to Baleba, but he's fallen off a bit of a cliff. He got dragged again at the weekend. He's been taken off 3 times this season at half-time, Carlos Baleba. He's not yet played 90 minutes in the Premier League this season. And it seems like he's had a bit of a drop-off here. So we'll have to wait to see exactly what happens. Now, Man United's interest in the player does still exist. he was pretty specific to Amorim in terms of what they were looking for. So I do think there is a slight attachment in this coming back around, as long as Amorim is still there and trusted to still remain there. But there has also been a feeling that Liverpool would go in for him next year if they felt they needed someone of his type. So let's look out for that. But Baleba, he's only 21, so I think that it was probably a very hard moment for him to manage. Like suddenly having all of that profile on him, all of that attention, knowing that he could make a transfer for £100 million to Man United, one of the biggest clubs in the world, then told it wouldn't be happening and blah, blah, blah. Very difficult. But yeah, not quite sure what's happened this season. But he's going to be back on. His future will definitely be talked about again in 2026. Probably in the summer, but I mean, at this rate, maybe Brighton want to cash in January. I don't know.
I don't think that's the case. Like, I was listening to Fabian Hertzler talking about this at the weekend, and yes, he was hooked. Part of it was that obviously he picked up quite a silly and a rash yellow card early on, and this was quite a physical battle with Wolves at the weekend, and thus with kind of playing 2-on-3 in terms of how they were shaped up. You don't want to run the risk of a central midfielder being sent off at that point. So I can understand why Hertz has done that. He's also come out and said, look, he's a young guy. His development in the last year was absolutely unbelievable, like unprecedented in the way that he rose to prominence. There are going to be natural dips and waves in his form. That's something that we can accept. And look, in some ways, it's a good thing in that regard that he's still playing at Brighton. Imagine the level of scrutiny if this was the performances at Manchester United, right? Like this would be, he'd already been canned on the scrap heap. Someone that's not going to make it.
He's in the sort of form you do normally get after you join Man United. He's already found it.
Maybe it's just residual. But I think that, he'll find his place back in this Brighton side, who have plenty of options in that midfield area, who are going to be able to rotate and give him the space he needs to kind of find his rhythm again. That's fine at this age, right? Like you can get to that point, and there needs to be an acceptance that, not everyone is going to have linear trajectories in terms of the way that they work through their game. So for me, I think that this is probably still one that potentially goes through next summer. He's an incredible player in terms of what he's able to bring to the table. Is he the complete package at this point in his career? No. And obviously, if you're paying this kind of money, you're spending a lot on potential as much as you are for kind of a player who's already kind of been there and done it. But I think that you look at the kind of trajectory of the player he's following in many ways, in Moises Caicedo, he's someone who spent some time kind of working it out and then hit this incredible run of putting it all together, has had his head turned a little bit in the summer by the fact that one of the biggest clubs on the planet has come in for him and is not quite with it at the start of the new season. I don't think there's anything particularly untoward in there for a player who's 21 years old, if I'm honest.
Yeah, well, look, if his future depends on Amorim staying at Man United, then my guy at number 7, his future probably depends on Amorim leaving Man United, and that's Kobbie Mainoo. This is still up in the air. Like, he's not getting enough minutes. He still doesn't seem to have the trust of Amorim, and I don't think he's getting the type of exposure and possibilities in this United setup that is convincing him that they do genuinely respect him as a player that's going to break through. Like, it's very hard to keep your patience as somebody like Kobbie Mainoo in this moment. Obviously, it's a World Cup year. Like, there was a moment in his playing career when he would have been very confident that he'd be part of this World Cup with England. And at the moment, you just can't see that opening up for him. So I think that Mainoo is... Well, he won't make this decision right now. He'll make it probably back end of November. But they are going to start putting the feelers out as to what could potentially happen here for him in January. We know that at the end of the last transfer window, Mainoo was interested in exploring the opportunity of going out on loan. Manchester United closed the door on that. Then he was told pretty soon after that he was basically in a battle with Bruno Fernandez for a place in the team. It was like, Amorim basically said that. Well, Bruno Fernandez is the club captain, and he's probably the only person in that team that Amorim seems to deem untouchable. So that's not really fair. And I think that if Mainoo doesn't get more opportunities, and obviously being out the Carabao Cup doesn't help, and they're not in Europe, so that there's limited game time opportunity. We'll have to wait to see what happens here, but there'll be plenty of teams that would be interested in going for Kobbie Mainoo. I mean, he's been linked to Chelsea, he's been linked to Real Madrid, he'll be linked to plenty of clubs coming forwards, but he's going to have to pick a club that he's just like a part of the furniture at. He's almost got to do a Jack Grealish here. Like, I know he's at the other end of his career from Jack Grealish, but you've almost got to have that mentality of like, I just want to play in a system that gets the best out of me and that I feel like I'm really contributing towards. Like, I want to see Kobbie Mainoo properly unlocked. Obviously, Tottenham's one that's talked about. Possibly that comes around under Thomas Frank. He's got to figure out exactly what he is as a player and what the other team is looking for in him. And the two need to marry up because he can't be wasting any more time. Like, it's a shame to have seen how this period of his career has gone and the setbacks that he's had to come through, because he's got big potential, but we want to start seeing it fulfilled.
Yeah, I mean, my kind of overwhelming first thought is that if he doesn't play enough this season, he's not going to be in England's 26-man World Cup squad. And if he doesn't make the World Cup squad, then surely he kind of has to leave Manchester United, unless there's a complete change of manager and system and whatever next summer. I do find it a weird one with Kobbie Mainoo. Like, obviously an incredibly talented footballer, but part of the kind of issue I have with it was that when he came through, I remember watching him and thinking, yeah, he's a good player. He was being hailed as like the second coming of Xavi, you know, in terms of the kind of hype around him. And I thought it was a little bit over the top. And thus, when he's now kind of dropped and, you know, kind of being asked to prove himself again, people are still kind of hailing him as this incredible second coming of Barcelona's, you know, never lose the ball midfield. And I've never hugely seen it. I think he's a good player, a talented player. I don't think he's better than Elliot Anderson. Like, there is a level of this I'm kind of looking at and saying, was the hype too much in the first place? And thus, is the fee going to be really high or deemed to be really high because there's an element of kind of his name means a lot. None of this is to say that Kobbie Mainoo is a bad player at all, right? Like, I think he's a really good, serviceable young player who seems to be kind of, and there's an element with United where people are kind of desperate to hang on. It's a bit like when Emil Smith-Rowe came through at Arsenal, right? Everyone was desperate for him to be the guy, you know, desperate for him to wear the number 10 shirt. And he's come to Fulham and he's been fine, but like not set the world on fire. And like, I think that most fans were looking for more. It's been disappointing on the whole. And I do think there is an element where when big clubs are at a low ebb, the academy products that are kind of proffered to be the answer. Now, look, some of them obviously are incredibly talented. Look at Bukayo Saka, who's gone on to be a world beater and the world beater that Arsenal fans thought he was. Smith-Rowe hasn't. And I do wonder whether there is just a kind of thing attached to his name. This isn't to say he shouldn't be playing or anything like that, by the way. Like, I'm not getting at that. I think he should be playing in this United team. I just wonder if the fees and the actual player you're getting don't necessarily match up, and that might end up getting him stuck in a bit of a glass cage in terms of what's going on at United.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, I just want to see the guy like given the opportunity to be himself.
Sure, me too. I agree.
I don't think that'll happen under Amorim. I really don't. So I think he's going to have to explore where that can happen. So we'll have to wait to see where that happens. I have got 3 more names, Jack, but let's visit them after the break.
We will indeed. Stick with us here on Ranks FC. When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks. Welcome back to Ranks FC for the third and final part of today's podcast, where we're talking about potential deals to keep an eye on for 2026. And for the last time, I'm going to hand you back to our transfer guru himself, Mr. Dean Jones.
Yeah, I'm going to start here at number 8 with a player that I think I'm obsessed with, and I'm actually desperate to see him in the Premier League. It's Dusan Vlahovic, who I think is going to leave Juventus in 2026. Like, there's still no sign of a new contract for him at Juve. I think that his pay demands are beyond what they can do. I think we've reached the point of no return. I don't know exactly what they would be looking for in January to get him at this stage. I'm trying to find that out at the moment. So I'll try to get that story soon. But ultimately, in January at the end of the season, I think Vlahovic is leaving. And I think that there should be a fight for this guy. I can't believe there hasn't been a fight for this guy.
Especially if he's leaving on a free.
Obviously, it means that he was already looking for a big contract, right? So that means that he's going to be looking for an even bigger contract. So I get it. Like, there might only be a limited amount of clubs. But from the same perspective, like, Vlahovic himself has got to be a little bit realistic here and think, what are my own ambitions? What is my level? And why am I worrying about like tens of thousands of pounds a week here rather than I'm already going to be on a great wage. I need to now find the best team to, maximize my potential in the game. So that's a situation that I think will come to a head. I was told that Newcastle are actually one of the teams like still interested and trying to be kept in the picture as to what would happen with Vlahovic. Now, I don't know how that would work.
Absolutely loves playing in black and white, this lad, doesn't he? Partizan Belgrade, Juventus, maybe Newcastle United.
Mate, I would love it. I think Vlahovic at Newcastle would be great. I don't think he's necessarily the perfect fit for what Eddie Howe wants to do. But in terms of like having status as a number 9 and what Newcastle like fans look for, I think Vlahovic is great. But there are like 10 teams in the Premier League that could be crying, and probably more, that should be crying out for Vlahovic, and others around Europe too. I think that we are getting to the stage where he's going to engineer a move. He's 25. Like, he's at a really good point in his career to show that he's got plenty more to give. This is a bit of a personal one, really, just because you know how much I love Vlahovic, and I've been frustrated as the fact it has never really properly taken off for him at Juventus. There have been fits and starts for him, and it's obvious that he's a good player. Just hasn't had the consistency and the goal flow to really prove that he could become a star for them. And even though he started the season well for them, there still didn't really seem to be the signs. So I don't know whether he ends up at Man United or Chelsea or Tottenham or West Ham or Fulham, mate. But I hope that I'd love him to end up at Fulham, obviously. But something's got to give for Vlahovic. And I think he's going to have to give up a few quid to actually get himself over to England, which I'm told he has always fancied.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'd be very, very surprised if he ends up at Fulham, let's put it that way. But he is still Juventus' top scorer this season. He's on 4. No one else has more than 2. It all did come in a pretty quick burst, towards the end of August, and then at the start of September, he was absolutely unplayable in that game against Borussia Dortmund. But that's the kind of thing he's very good at. He's always been good in transition, right? Like that's the element of the game that suits him the most. And he's in a really funny place here at Juve, where he was obviously given another opportunity at the start of the season by Igor Tudor, and he took that opportunity to begin with. But equally, they are playing with one up front, although Jonathan David can obviously play there and in the number 10. They've brought in Jonathan David. They bring in Lois Openda as well. It felt like it was the kind of, okay, these are going to be our guys, and Vlahovic can be a bit part player until the contract expires. Now, he's forced his way back into that picture, and I think that's a great thing for him, and definitely does show that he's still kind of trying to fight to make this stick and make this work. But I think that this season, he's going to find it increasingly hard to come by minutes if the others start to actually sit in and start to play the way that they are expected to as those two signings. Like, it's going to take Openda a little bit of time to get up to speed. Fine. Jonathan David is still trying to work out whether he's best a little bit withdrawn or up top as the kind of point in this system that Juve are playing. And all of that is grand. But like, you see the kind of the minutes starting to reduce in recent weeks for Vlahovic. And I think that's an interesting thing, right? He comes off the bench against Atalanta. He comes off the bench against Milan. He comes off the bench for 4 minutes in that game against Villarreal, in a game that they're chasing. Bear in mind, they won 0 of these games, and his minutes have been kind of reduced over the course of it as they're trying to see it. So for me, it's frustrating trying to see where he fits, and he must be frustrated by the fact that obviously he went on a bit of a hot streak and still wasn't really given the opportunities to make it stick. He played in that game against Inter. He started in the game against Verona, and then as soon as there was 2 games without a goal, and bear in mind, Juve scored 4 goals in that game against Inter, and the Dortmund game came after it. The fact that, a couple of weeks later in these games against Atalanta Milan, he's not being trusted anymore, despite being their top scorer, probably speaks to actually where his position is in the squad. And so for me, that probably tells you, where it's going to go. The question is going to be whether Juve do try and cash in January and kind of make some money, or they kind of wait this one out to the end of the season and let him go on a free. That's going to be the interesting element of all of this one. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see January bids for Dusan Vlahovic with 6 months left on his contract.
Yeah, look, at number 9, I have got another forward. And I don't think the two could be married up for opening up space. But Joshua Zirkzee is starting to realise that he's just not going to fit in at Man United, kind of like Kobbie Mainoo, I guess. And what does he do next? Now, the obvious thing is to go back to Italy, where he's been linked with Juve and Milan, Como, and Bologna will probably take him back. But what if he was to stay in the Premier League too? I think there would be opportunity for him to do that. I was told that Everton and West Ham are being kept in the loop as to what might happen with him. But I do think that Zirkzee will leave Man United in January. He's not getting opportunities. Didn't even make it onto the pitch when they beat Sunderland at home at the weekend.
Perhaps on loan in January, maybe.
So I think an initial loan, because they value him at around £30 million. Nobody's going to pay that for him, are they, in January? It's completely needless spending that. When you can get him on loan and see how it goes. If they got rid of Zirkzee, why not go for Vlahovic and give Šeško some competition? I don't know. I'm just saying. But Zirkzee, I don't know what type of player he is for sure. Like, I want to know what he is. Where does he play? Where should he play? And at Man United, I think he's been caught between a rock and a hard place, and he's neither a striker nor a 10, and nobody knows where they could play him, so they just don't. And I think it's unfortunate because I think he's a really good player, and I think he's got some really good technical ability. And I think he's a goal threat as well. But it's not going to happen for him at Man United, and he's going to leave.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Juve would take him, just in terms of, I think he might be just slightly too similar to Jonathan David in terms of what he brings as that kind of 9.5 figure. But I do think you're right. I think that there are clubs that will find a way to make this work, whether that's as a strike pairing. Wouldn't mind him seeing him in a kind of inter system where there's 2 up top and one of them is allowed to drop off and link play in the same kind of way. And so I do think that there is a space for Zirkzee to go and thrive somewhere. I don't exactly know where that is, but on paper, it makes sense to have him in one of those 2 number 10 spots at Manchester United. That fits with what he should be able to do. But what Amorim demands of those players, one of them kind of being someone who drives wide and makes things happen, and Bremer's got that one locked down for the time being. The other spot fits him more. But Matheus Cunha has come in and they're kind of hanging their hopes on him being a talismanic figure. We know that Bruno would probably prefer to play in that, that part of the pitch as well. It makes it a little bit difficult for him to find a space in this team. And so when you're putting it in that context, I do think that this is one that will happen. I just think you have to be very careful with where he goes next, because it's got to be somewhere that they understand his skill set and move for him to be the player that he wants to be, not a player that can be transformed into something else. Because if we've learned one thing from this move, is that if it's not kind of hardwired around him, it doesn't make sense in the same way that it did at Bologna, especially with Thiago Motta there. Now, this is a different conversation for another day, but I'd be very surprised if Thiago Motta isn't back in management by the summer of next season. And so if there is a space there where you can reunite him with a manager who did get the best out of him and was able to kind of play to his skill set, that's something probably worth keeping an eye on at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I'm going to round it all off by just putting a player on the radar that is lower in profile to, I think, all of these actually than what we've spoken about today. But at Brentford, Yarmolyuk is definitely catching the attention of some big teams. I've already been told of Tottenham and Man United and Chelsea looking at his midfield performances. He's a consistent, reliable performer for Brentford and has been for quite a while now. He's only 21, Ukrainian international. Thomas Frank obviously knows him from his time at Brentford, and perhaps that's where that level of interest comes from at Tottenham. The Man United interest was interesting because it did actually come from, I can't remember if it's the Ukrainian outlet or somewhere similar. But it wasn't like an English-based just punt in the dark as to, oh yeah, Man United are interested in this player because he's doing well. It did seem to carry some weight. And when I checked it out, they have scouted him. So there is something behind that. And Chelsea, well, of course, Chelsea have got an eye on it. It's right on their doorstep. And if there's a young player to be had that's at a decent attainable fee, then they will go and look for it. So yeah, that was it. Really, he's just one to put on the radar of people, because I think at the end of this season, Brentford have got another fight on their hands after the one that they've already had to that they've lost, I should say, really, for Mbeumo and for Visa. Now their next one is looking like it's coming. And while you might think it'll be Sharda or maybe Thiago, I think it might be this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to have a fight in their hands for Nathan Collins as well. But that's
Collins is the other one, actually. That's true.
But no, I think this is interesting because Brentford have had some incredible players pass through the doors in recent years. And for years, we sat here and I couldn't believe that no one had come in for either Norgard or Matthias Jensen, who I thought were both absolutely exceptional football players. And it kind of passed me by as to why no one thought, oh, okay, they'd be really, really good squad players. I remember talking about Matthias Jensen being a really good fit for Liverpool for about 3 years. Now, that time has probably passed. And obviously, Norgard has eventually joined Arsenal. Kind of as the kind of backup number 6, should we say. But I'm surprised that no one made those moves earlier. Just really, really good, solid Premier League players who are never going to let you down, who just have that kind of ineffable work rate, but also that skill set and the technical ability to hang with pretty much anyone. Now, Brentford have done a very good job fending off interest for them, but I don't necessarily think that's going to happen again in terms of people not paying attention to the players coming through. And I really like Yarmolyuk. I think what's really interesting about him, and I say this often about Mikel Merino, right? He's one of those players that can sit in and do a job in a number of different areas. So if you need him to sit and be the deep line midfielder, he can do that. If you need him to be an all-action, very high-intensity number 8, he can do that. If you want to push him forward and get him into box crash, we haven't seen very much of this from Yarmolyuk yet, but I do think you could find a space which would allow him to actually improve on that goal output and assist output, which you haven't really seen at Brentford, given the kind of nature of the way they play. I think that it's there. And we've seen it in different elements, whether with the Ukrainian kind of youth teams or also, back at Dnipro, back when he was in Ukraine in the first place. So I quite like this, not in terms of, I think he should probably stick around for a little bit longer at Brentford, maybe another season, but I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever to see this, because I don't think people are going to allow Brentford to just bring through very, very, solid, excellent Premier League midfielders without them getting interest from bigger fish in the pond, should we say. So I'm not surprised by this one.
Yeah, how dare they? How dare they? How very dare they? He's gone under the radar a little bit up to now, but those days are gone. They are being watched every single game now, Brentford, and will be probably for years to come, because people have noticed that they do know what they're doing when it comes to this scouting and data malarkey, and they've nailed it. So there you go.
Yeah, well, we talked about it earlier, right? Being feeder clubs and all of these things, but it doesn't matter. If you can go and replace again and build it out, then that's the way to make it sustainable. So I wouldn't be surprised to see another couple poached in the summer. I also wouldn't be surprised to see Brentford just replace them exceptionally well again and make it all stick. So more of the same, I would imagine, down at the G-Tech. And with that, Dean, I think it's probably time for us to call this episode to a close. So first and foremost, I have to thank you. That was absolutely wonderful. I very much enjoyed working.
That's a bit different, wasn't it? We chatted about 10 randomish players and managed to get them all into the same episode. And I hope we've managed to entertain people along the way. So that was fun.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you. That was very informative and I enjoyed it very much. Thank you to you guys for listening as ever. We always appreciate you, and plenty more coming on the feed as well. Obviously, only one episode. There's no Champions League this week, but the truth will be back on Friday as well. Potentially taking a little look at Liverpool after a disastrous final week before the international break for Arne Slot's Reds. I've been Jack Collins. This has been Ranks FC. Thank you so much for sticking with us as ever. And we'll see you all very shortly. Take it easy, Rank Squad. Peace. When we started this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Allbirds and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio. With hundreds of ready-to-use templates, Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/ranks. Go to shopify.com/ranks. That's shopify.com/ranks.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.